It is my honor and privilege to introduce Governor Marty Schreiber, former governor of Wisconsin, who's a dedicated and outspoken advocate on Alzheimer's disease and caregiving. While caring for his late wife, Elaine, for more than 18 years, he chronicled their journey together in an award-winning book, My Two Elaines, Learning, Coping, and Surviving as an Alzheimer's Caregiver. A native of Milwaukee, Marty and Elaine raised 4 children and have 13 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. So I'm really thrilled to have Governor Schreiber with us here today to share his story, his thoughts, and his estimable insights on the caregiving journey. Please, Governor Schreiber.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Hi. Hey, and Dr. Gogler, thank you. Where'd you go? He's hiding. Thank you for that introduction, sir. Wow, is it nice to be with you here. I don't know why you're here, but they told me I would be auditioning for the Golden Bachelor. But apparently that's not what's going to... Are you going to take my picture? I haven't had my picture taken since I lost for governor back in 1982. And so thank you very much. Did you get a good one? Thank you. What's your name, sir?
Mark.
Mark, thank you. What's your social security number? Anyway, it's good to see you. So anyway, hi everybody. This is, I'll tell you, it's 4.5 hours from Milwaukee here to the university. And I thought 4.5 hours, I thought this guy better be good. And I was, I'm getting so anxious to hear what I'm going to say. And I just for a moment, I want to come up to I want to see the person who came up to me and said, "Didn't you used to be Martin Schreiber?" And so we're glad to be here. Caregivers, we love you. Caregivers, thank you for what you do. Caregivers, it's a tough job. My first experience with dementia goes back to when I was campaigning for governor in Eau Claire back to 1978. And I gave a talk, a campaign talk, and after the talk was over, this elderly gentleman came up to me, and he said, "Schreiber," he said, "that was the world's most god-awful speech I've ever heard in my whole life." Well, his wife was there, and she heard what was happening. And she was embarrassed. She was so embarrassed. So she came rushing over. She said, "Governor, please excuse my husband. He's old and he's senile. And all he does is just repeat whatever he hears everybody else say." So here we are, you and I, to talk about My Two Elaines, learning, coping, and surviving as an Alzheimer's caregiver. And I'll tell you a little bit. The book basically is based on the fact that if there's one thing worse than Alzheimer's, it's ignorance of the disease. When I say ignorance of the disease, one of the areas of ignorance is the medical profession. Many times they don't understand that when there is a diagnosis, there are 2 patients, the person living with Alzheimer's and the caregiver. Caregivers have a 40% chance of dying before their loved one due to stress-related illness, 40%. If you are a caregiver, your mortality rate is 60% higher than that of a non-caregiver. So caregivers understand that, and understand that as a person who is ill, as a person who has their battery worn down, there's no way that you can continue to be the kind of loving husband or partner that you would like to be. So anyway, so I understand that if there's one thing worse than Alzheimer's, it's ignorance of the disease. And when I say ignorance, I don't mean how the amyloids work and so forth. I mean, just understand, we can't beat this disease right now. There is no cure, and it can't be prevented. That dire prognosis may want to force us or have us conclude to give up. But I want to share with caregivers that we do have something that we can do, something that offers hope something that offers comfort. And that is, we can make the determination that we are going to live our best lives possible. And we are going to live our best lives possible so we can help our loved one live their best life possible. That becomes so very, very important. Helping Elaine live her best life possible? Well, she asked me once, how are my parents? Well, I said, Elaine, they're both dead. No, they're not. Yes, they are, Elaine. The shock on her face when she realized she didn't attend her parents' funeral, much less be able to say goodbye and grieve. I promised I would never put her through that again. So the next time she asked me, how are my parents? Oh, I said, Elaine, your mom and dad are doing great. I said, your mom likes working at church. Your dad likes his sports. Oh, she said, that makes me feel so good. That makes me feel so good. That's what I call therapeutic fibbing. Therapeutic fibbing. Two things about therapeutic fibbing. Number one, I tried it the first year of marriage. The second point about therapeutic fibbing, and not everyone believes me on this, understand this, I want to be very honest, not everyone believes me when I tell them. You remember the story, you heard the story of Moses and the 10 Commandments, Mount Sinai? Remember, had to bring down those big tablets? I was there, and I helped him. And so I want you to know, if you're helping Moses, don't call him Mo. He hates that. And so I said, Moses, I said, after being corrected, how are we going to get this tablets of stone down to the bottom? Well, he says, we'll work at it together. So we huffed and we puffed and we got these stones down to the bottom. And here I looked at it, and Arabic, Hebrew, I couldn't understand, but I knew there were do's and don'ts on that one side, something to do with lying and so forth and so forth. But anyway, I walked around the back of these tablets, and I looked. On the same tablets, exactly the same tablet, but on the other side were written the words, therapeutic fibbing is good. Therapeutic fibbing is advisable. Therapeutic fibbing, don't pay any attention on the other side of what it says about lying, because therapeutic fibbing is good. So we have to understand that. So I learned about therapeutic fibbing. And so what I did was I had some friends whose loved one were living with Alzheimer's, and I saw how they lacked the patience and the understanding. And so what I did then in turn was decide I wanted to do something who was going to be on the same journey that I was on, and I want to try and help them. And so one of the ways I thought I could do that would be writing the book about My Two Elaines. And the first Elaine, well, that was the girl I met when I was a freshman in high school. And we sat next to each other in Latin class. I think I fell in love right away, and we dated, and we went steady, and we got engaged, got married, 4 children, 13 grandchildren, now 10 great-grandchildren since the writer of the latest the latest introduction. But anyway, that was the first Elaine. So much to her credit is something that I have carried with me throughout this entire period, this entire journey. If I would run for political office, she would be the hardest working campaigner. If I would lose, and this is what I'm talking about, so important, she would never let me feel defeated. And I think you and I as caregivers can understand, yes, we can lose something, but we cannot ever allow ourselves to feel defeated. We can always take comfort in the fact that we do have that hope, that ability, that satisfaction of knowing we are helping our loved one live their best life possible. That's also so very important. So the second Elaine began to appear when she was about 63 years of age. And she would get lost driving to and from places she had been going to and from for the last 10 years. She was a great cook. Sometimes she would mess up her recipes so badly that she would cry. She would tell me something happened and it never occurred. And that was the beginning of the second Elaine. And so as things progressed, I understood a couple things. I understood that it's a terrible disease, a terrible prognosis. I understand I wasn't prepared. I had not the slightest idea of what it was like to be a caregiver. And so I began to learn and to better understand. And so I wrote this book, and this is what they call a self-published book. In other words, nobody was interested in what I wrote, so I published it myself. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the one that was published by Harper's Publishing. But I'll tell you about this book here. This book here is the first self-published book. There are 90,000 of these books in print. Only 89,800 left in my garage. But people have told me, and this sounds like bragging, you know, people have told me they have picked up this book and they started to read it and they couldn't put it down. I'm going to brag a little bit because that has actually happened with this book. Here's what happened. We go back like to January, like 3 years ago, before Harper's picked up the book. And so I needed more books. I ran out of books. I said, so the printer got the books done not only on time, but ahead of time. And so do you see this shininess, that lacquer? Well, there's a varnish thing. And so what happens is he didn't let it dry. And it became sticky. So people picked up my book and they started to read it and they couldn't put it down. However, it was unbelievable in the publicity and in the advertising because people had to walk around like this, and because it was January, they couldn't put their coat, they couldn't put their arm through their coat jacket to go out and get milk, butter, and eggs and so forth, so they just sort of walked around like this, and so people then got an idea that this book is available. But they did, however, blame me for 16 cases of frostbite. Whether it was 16 hands of frostbite or 4 hands with 4 fingers of frostbite, I don't know. But we're going to have to try and figure that out. So, by the way, Nancy Rowland gave me this book here, Dancing with Louie, and she came over to say hello, and so I wanted to thank you for that, Nancy, and tell you that it's entitled "A Father-Daughter Dance Before and After Louie Body Dementia Came to Live with Us." So anyway, Harper Publishing saw this book, and they thought it was important enough. One of the people at Harper's told me that do you remember Dr. Spock going back? You wouldn't have a baby without Dr. Spock. And the people at Harper's said, we believe your book is so important that we don't want anyone to enter the journey of Alzheimer's without having a chance to get a basic understanding from your book. As important as Dr. Spock is, so this book is important to new caregivers. And so that really is quite a proud thing. Now, they came out with this book as a hardcover. Unfortunately, this book was $27.99 for this book hardcover. $34.99 if you're from Canada. Anybody here from Canada? Because if you are from Canada and you buy this book for $34.99 versus the $27.99, the difference in price that you paid more, we will give you back when you become our 51st state. So what is happening is Elaine is now in assisted living memory care, and I tried to spend as much time with her as possible. And one day we're having lunch, and she starts to cry. And I said, Elaine, why are you crying? Well, she says, I'm beginning to love you more than my husband. Well, I didn't ask her what's wrong with her turkey husband. I didn't do that. But here is what this meant and what I want to share with caregivers, what I want to share and have us understand. It is not necessary for our loved one to know our name in order for hearts to touch. Hearts can touch by giving a hug, by holding a hand, by singing a song, by listening to music, by a smile, by just being together. And so many times friends, neighbors, and relatives, well, it doesn't pay for me to go over and say anything because they don't know who I am. That's, I think, wrong, because hearts can touch. And so I know it's painful, so very, very painful when our loved one doesn't remember our name. But that's a fact of the journey, and to take and rejoice in the fact that our goal, what is? Help our loved one live their best life possible. How can we do that? We can do that by joining their world, and that becomes so important. So I had a chance to meet a new friend who's now my new best friend, other than you and you and you. With David, we were talking about, a couple of the things that were in the book, and he seemed to say that, one of the things I wanted to tell David and what I wrote in the book, I said that to ask for help means you're not giving up. We caregivers sometimes are so selfish and arrogant that we think we can do it ourselves. Please understand, you can't do it alone. You should not do it alone. Understand that to ask for help means that you're not giving up. To ask for help is a sign of courage. We have to understand that. Remember, 40% of caregivers dying before their loved one because of dementia-related. Why? So, my children had an intervention with me. They sat me down. I was drinking much too much. My health was being affected. That was certainly causing a problem. And they came and they sat me down. They said, Dad, if you don't do something, you're going to be dead before Mom. And we don't want to lose both parents. And it helped me better understand, yes, I do have a devotion to my wife. And yes, I can take care of her. But the fact of the matter is, I can't take care of her if my battery is worn down. And I don't have the capability of mental acuity, of patience to deal with that. And my battery was running down, and I was as irrationally irritable as any human being could ever be. Sometimes yelling at the grandchildren for no reason, yelling at the person checking out at Kohl's department store and so forth. My battery was running down because I wasn't smart enough to know the importance of taking care of yourself. And so I wrote the book, and maybe about maybe 4 weeks before I'm ready to go to print, I find a series of notes and journals that Elaine had been keeping since her diagnosis. And I want you to know that we had prayed together and we had cried together. But never did I understand two things. Number one, the courage that it takes to be diagnosed with this illness and go forward. The absolute courage. But also never did I understand how important I was as her lifeline. And that's so important for us caregivers to understand. Hypothetically speaking, okay, I win a lottery, and I want all of you, my new friends, we're going to go for a Caribbean cruise in the Gulf of. We're going to go for a Caribbean cruise in the Gulf, and with all together. Now we're all together on this ship. It's a wonderful ship, and we're doing the Calypso, and we're gin and tonic, and gin and coke, and rum and coke. We're having a great time, and one of you falls overboard, and we throw you a lifeline, and you're saying, no, you're not saved. Why aren't you saved? Well, because that lifeline is frayed, and you grab it, and it breaks, and it's of no use. Well, what happens is caregivers fray their lifeline. We make our lifeline weak by gnawing at it. And we gnaw at it almost every day by not eating right, by not getting enough sleep, by not getting enough socialization, by not taking care of ourselves. All of the very important things you need just for life itself to be strong, we don't do under situations where we really should be doing it. And so understand you are a lifeline. And that's what I got through Elaine's notes, how important I was as her lifeline and how much she depended upon me. And so I went through her notes and journals with my two daughters, and every chapter begins with one of Elaine's notes. And what we attempt to do is not only show how important it is for caregivers to take care of themselves, but what we wanted to also show the courage that it takes to move forward, but then to also have an understanding and a sense of the emotions up and down that someone goes through. When David and I were talking, he said he really could understand this matter of the pivot. So the pivot, there's two pivots. There's the first pivot by our loved one. By the grace of God, finally entered her own world. Because as you will note in her writings, when she was in the journey early between thinking she did or thinking she didn't, life was so very, very challenging for her. So very, very challenging. And then finally, by the grace of God, her world entirely And that was so important, I thought, for her, as I said, maybe by the grace of God. The other pivot is by the caregiver. And this pivot is easier to talk about than it is to do. And that is to let go of this person who once was, so we can embrace the person who now is. So very, very difficult, so very, very challenging. Intellectually, that is so important to do because it makes life so much better. And if we can do that, as long as I tried to keep Elaine in my world. Elaine, it didn't happen on a Thursday, it happened on a Friday. Elaine, it wasn't the Smiths, it was the Joneses. Elaine, you asked me 20 times what time we're leaving. Elaine, I told you not to put the car keys in the dishwasher. Elaine, what did you do with that money? So I'm reprimanding her for things she can't remember having said. And she's going through this internal worry about what's going to be happening to me. I think I did mention, remember, today Alzheimer's can't be cured or prevented. And it couldn't be 20 years ago, was plus when Elaine was diagnosed. I want you to know when she was at assisted living memory care, there was a period of time where they actually thought she was getting better. And this is an amazing thing. They actually thought she was, so I'll tell you how that came about. So Elaine and I were having lunch at assisted living memory care and sitting at a table, and over to the side, there was a doctor and a nurse. Now, as we're having lunch, Elaine begins to tell me and everybody else around how intelligent and how good looking I am. And anyway, so she was telling me how intelligent, how good looking I am. And so what happened is there was a doctor and a nurse sitting, as I said, over there, and they looked at me. She's right. He is intelligent, and he is good looking. So they wrote an article for the New England Medical Journal, Elaine Schreiber is getting better. There are no dummies at the New England Medical Journal. They wrote back and they said, you have to show 3 things where someone is getting better. You only show 2 things, so we're rejecting your article. As happenstance would have it, a little bit of time, maybe, I don't know, 4 weeks went by or so forth. Now we happen to be at the same table having lunch, happen to have the same doctor and the same nurse sitting over here. Now Elaine got on one of these tangents. How did we meet? How did we meet? When did we meet? How did we meet? Elaine, when we were freshmen in high school, we sat next to each other in Latin class. I fell in love with you right away. I said, not only did I want to marry you, not only did I want you to be the mother of my children, but I said also, if any boy got within 50 feet of you, I bopped him on the head. She looked at me and she said, you're a bullshitter. Well, now they have the 3 things. And if you pick up the May, June, July issue of the New England Medical Journal, you're going to be able to read that. One of the things also I want to share with caregivers, so I had a friend who's 75 years old and enjoying retirement. Really fine, wow, what a good person. So he has dinner one night and he has a massive heart attack and he dies, snap of a finger, gone. Well, there was a funeral, and people came by and expressed their condolences, their sympathy, as tragic as it was. But there was closure. There was closure. What happens is caregivers don't get closure. What happens is we see our loved one disappear a little bit every day, and we don't acknowledge the fact that we are going through a grieving process. And I want to point out to caregivers, it is okay to realize the challenge of what you are about. Not only the external challenge of how we need to do things and help out where we never thought before, but the emotional internal challenge. And that is to understand, again, you can't do it alone. How important it is, for example, for counseling, but how important it is to understand this matter of grieving and to face it and to just, if you got to cry, go ahead. In fact, if you don't cry, you're just not helping yourself as much as you should. It's 9:30 in the morning. Elaine wants a glass of wine. No, you can't have a glass of wine. That's not the answer. Elaine, do you want red wine or white wine? Do you want it in a taller glass or in a smaller glass? Should we invite our friends over, or should we drink it? Oh, why don't we have a cup of coffee while we have a glass of wine? Thoughtful how we're going to have it. Why don't we have a cup of coffee and get off of the wine? So redirection is what I'm saying. Redirection ends up being so very important. I learned that you cannot beat this disease head on. You can't. So Elaine was going to assisted living, before assisted living, she was going to a daycare. And I had so much trouble getting her to give me some respite. She wouldn't allow any other person in the home to take care of her. She wouldn't go for a walk with anybody. And I was at my wit's end, and I'm thinking, and I remembered how much she enjoyed college, university. She got a master's degree from University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and so I said, well, how would you like to go to class? Oh, she said, I'd love to go to class. And so what happened was I talked to the people at daycare, and they understood, wink, wink. She's going to class. I had got a notebook, spiral notebook, and a fountain pen, ballpoint pen, and I would take Elaine to class. Some mornings I would drive to the entranceway. I said, okay, here we go. She said, I'm not going in. Wild horses could not drag her out of that car. And so, okay. So we drove around a bit, came back into the front of the entrance to the daycare. Time to go. Okay, we went in. Understand, please, we can't fight this disease. Understand that by redirection, and by therapeutic fibbing, and by understanding us keeping our strength up so we can handle all of these different challenges that come along, all of that then becomes such a very important thing. When we were talking, Dave and I mentioned there's my two Elaines, okay, the woman who I married with, who was healthy, and the woman who later on became the second Elaine. But there were also two Martys. And if you're a caregiver, if you're a caregiver and your name is Mary, you are Mary, number one, but you're also going to be Mary, second Mary. You're going to be two Marys. And if you're a caregiver and your name is Sam, there's going to be two Sams. The first Mary or the first Sam cannot continue to be that person. And I'll tell you why. As a loving husband, when Elaine was diagnosed, the doctor says there's 4 things we should do. Numenda and Aricept. I don't have an idea of whether or not that helped or not, but that's what they said. So Numenda and Aricept. Number 2, socialization. That ends up being the most important thing that we can do to take care of ourselves. Number 3, walking, which is the best exercise for the brain. That's really good. And the 4th, a glass of red wine every evening. Elaine got 4 weeks ahead with a glass of red wine every evening and 3 weeks behind in the walking. But here is the thing. Martin, the husband, knew that a walk is sufficient in a half an hour. Martin, the caregiver, should have known what should have happened. So we're going for a walk. As we're walking, Elaine says, oh, look at that beautiful flower. Elaine, come on, we've got to get this walk in. We'd be walking, oh, look at here, listen to the bird. No, we have to keep on walking. In other words, Martin, the first Martin, was ignorant of what it's like really to be a caregiver. Because as a caregiver, you would become smart enough to know that there are going to be moments of joy that you can find that are sort of brilliant in their nature. To be able to look at a flower with your loved one and have that be appreciated, or listening to a bird, how great is that? And so we are 2 people as caregivers. So we don't ever want to tell a lie. We want to do everything ourselves. We are doing all kinds of things that a caregiver should never do. So understand, please, that whatever your first name is as a caregiver, you should be morphing. Whatever your name is, you should be morphing into being a caregiver. And then you're going to have to embrace a new thought process. A new thought process of not lying. A new thought process of asking for help. A new thought process of making sure you take care of yourself more vigilant than other times. So here we are in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'm with some really wonderful people. And what you have to understand also is that this disease takes us to places we never thought we would be. I never thought I would be here with you today in my wildest dreams did I ever think that. But here we are. But this reminds me, going to places you never thought you would be. I was elected to the Wisconsin State Senate back in 1962. And one of my responsibilities as a member of the State Senate Education Committee was to go to Washington, D.C. for a meeting. And if you take a 5:30 in the morning airplane out of Washington, D.C., you can go, attend your meeting, and come back the same day. And that's what I was in the process of doing. It's now 5 o'clock in the morning, and we're boarding the airplane. And here in front of me is a very distinguished looking gentleman. He's getting on the airplane. As he gets on the airplane, he asks the flight attendant, does this plane stop in Detroit? She says, yes, sir. We stop in Detroit. People get off the airplane. People get on the airplane. We go on to Washington, D.C. He said, I have to get off in Detroit. She said, fine. No, he says, I have to get off in Detroit. She, yes, sir. He says, look, I'm inclined to fall asleep. If I fall asleep, I could miss one of the most important meetings I may. I have to get off. Will you help me? She says, yeah. He says, do you promise? Yes. He says, do you promise? She says, sir, I promise I will get you off of this airplane in Detroit. Now we land in Washington, D.C. And this distinguished-looking gentleman, as he gets off the airplane, he goes to the flight attendant, and he yells at her like I've never heard anyone berated before in my whole life. It was something. I never thought I would hear anything like that, ever, ever. And I felt sorry for the flight attendant. So I went up after the person left, and I said, my goodness, I said, that man was angry. And she said, he was angry. You should have seen the fellow I put off in Detroit. So I think what I would want to do, I'm going to read you a few excerpts from Elaine's notes. A couple things. First of all, I hate golf, okay? And I'll talk about that before I go into reading you a couple of these notes. I hate golf. And my love used to be sailing. I can't get around so much anymore for sailing, on and off the boat and so forth. And so, if you ask me what is a good day of golf for me, or what is a hitting par or an eagle or so forth, the hole-in-one, what do I like? I like being with you. I like talking with caregivers. I like trying to help us both understand the challenge of being a caregiver, about how maybe we should be taking better care of ourselves, how we shouldn't be afraid to ask for help. That's what I enjoy doing. And it's been a very, well, as I said, you end up being in places you never thought you would be, and so caregivers look for those opportunities, and because they're there, and also look sometimes maybe for the humor of it all. Anyway, so if you know of anyone who would want a former governor of Wisconsin who made the sky bluer and the grass greener and reduced taxes and increased services and so forth, that would be the one that you would want to hear talking about. Anyway, so let me read a couple excerpts from, and then what we're going to do is we'll talk about prayer, patience, and persistence, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. And in the questions and answer session, I will try and repeat the question so everyone can hear the question. If you ask me a question that I do not know the answer to, I will rephrase your question, so there will be no question that I won't be able to respond to. So anyway, this is her very first writing. And when she was diagnosed, she wrote a letter to what she called her dear loved ones. And she writes, "It wasn't until a few weeks ago that I really had to say, yes, I do have Alzheimer's. I had read of signs that indicate Alzheimer's, like getting overly upset for no reason and having trouble with names and directions. But I still didn't think it was a problem for me. But in hindsight, for too long, I've been getting lost driving, having trouble keeping days straight, and difficulties with names and schedules. Still, I still felt I could handle it. It won't get worse. But this morning, I started reading about the mid-stage of Alzheimer's in hopes of preparing myself better, and realized I'm not very far away. That is most scary, but I have to accept it. So she also is, trying to understand what's going on in her life and trying to make adjustments. And she writes here in her journal, she writes, I'm so lucky he is a good cook and seems to enjoy making healthy and delicious meals. It's a good thing, as my Alzheimer's isn't getting any better. So cooking and baking with steps that I need to work on are no longer easy for me. I hate to think I'm getting worse, but I must be. So as I said, in her notes also are some very good things that she said about me. I don't put that in here for self-grandizement. I put that in there to drive home to the caregiver how important they are. But listen, she said these wonderful things about me and a lot. But listen to this. I'm not enjoying my role anymore as Marty's wife. Because of his having concerns about my Alzheimer's, he doesn't let me be me. He doesn't let me go for a walk if I want to, or to the store alone. I used to appreciate him, what I thought was concern, but he holds me captive, much too much. I'm going to try to have a second opinion because I really don't think I have any problem. I know how to drive or walk any place I want to, but he doesn't believe me, and I hate the control he has placed on me. I don't even think I have Alzheimer's per se. And so she's going through that, and at the same time I'm yelling at her, why are you asking me that same question over and over and over, or why are you putting the keys in the dishwasher and so forth. So I'm going to just, my very favorite one, and then we can open it up for questions. Well, no, this is my favorite one. She writes, life is good, and I plan to have it continue that way until my children tell me it's time for a nursing home or something like that. This is realistic with what my Alzheimer's book says about my future. But till then, I will try my best to be normal, whatever that means, and keep my happy side of life always continuing. I'm lucky to have such a good family and many friends to help me get through all this. And so another great day to thank the Lord and smile, smile, smile. And so smiling is so important, but so is music, so is singing, so is touching of hearts. And remember, they don't have to know our name. But anyway, so prayer, patience, and persistence, okay? Someone told me this story, and whether it's true or not, I don't know, but we could assume it's true for the moment, if you wish. But anyway, so this woman had this parrot, and all of this parrot knew, the only words was, Polly wants a party, Polly wants a party, Polly. Those are the only words that this lady's parrot knew. Well, she graduated from the University of Minnesota, and she was expecting some of her friends who graduated from the University of Wisconsin, which has a football team of the Green Bay Packers, which won a couple Super Bowls, which the university didn't do yet. Where was I? So anyway, because all this lady knew that the lady's parent, Polly wants a party, Polly wants a party, and so she was concerned that her friends from the University of Wisconsin graduate school are going to come over and talk to her, and they're going to think less of her because all her parent knows is Polly wants a party. What are they going to think? That really troubles her, particularly the fact that the Vikings haven't won a Super Bowl. But then what really bothered her was the fact that that's all her parent knew, and they're going to think less of her. She becomes so concerned about that, about what her friends are going to think, that she goes to see her priest. She says, Father, she says, you have to help me. I have this parrot. All this parrot knows is Polly wants a party, Polly wants a party. Not only that, my friends are coming over to visit, and they're going to think less of me because that's all. What do I do? The priest said, this is a miracle. He said, I myself have two parrots, Peter parrot and Paul parrot. He said, I've had them for 7 years, and all they do is pray. They pray every day of every month of every year. Every year, if they prayed for 7 years, all they do is pray all the time. And what we should do is take your parrot and put it in with my parrots, Peter parrot and Paul parrot, and my parrots will be a good influence on yours. So they agreed. The lady went home and got her parrot. brought it over to the priest's home. They opened up the cage. They put the lady's parrot in the cage. And sure enough, Polly wants a party. Polly wants a party. Peter Parrot looked at Paul Parrot and said, our prayers have finally been answered. So anyway, thoughts, ideas, questions. If you ask a question and there's someone here who has a pretty good answer, don't hesitate, because all of us have had different experiences on this journey that are sometimes more helpful in just sharing that at one-to-one. And so how are we doing on time? Where is our timekeeper? Are we okay? Are we doing okay on time?
Great, yeah, we have about 15-ish minutes for some Q&A here, so.
15-ish minutes?
Yeah, a little over.
You sound like someone from Minneapolis, 15-ish. I'm sorry.
If anyone has questions written down, please do raise those up in the air. Katie?
Sure, I can start with a question. Our earlier panel today talked about their experiences, our young caregiver panel talked about their experiences with guilt and grief, both during the time that they were caregiving as well as after their loved one had passed away. And I was wondering if you could speak a bit about your experience with guilt and grief throughout your journey.
Good. Where are you? I hear your voice, but...
Over here.
Oh, you're way back there, my goodness. Okay, the question is, how do you help young people in the grieving process? Or what?
Sorry, let me rephrase. Wondering if you could share your own experience with guilt and grief during the time that you were caregiving as well as after Elaine passed away.
Okay, my time with guilt and grief. To all of us caregivers, if we want to, we can have guilt destroy our happiness. And I can give you 200 million reasons why I should feel guilty. And one of the most important things I think we can do for ourselves is to get control over our mind and understand that, as my counselor said, don't shoulda on yourself. And to understand that, yes, I may have made some mistakes, but I did the best I could at the time. That becomes so important. And then the grieving, as I said, I didn't recognize the fact that I was going through a grieving process, as Elaine would lose some of her memory almost every day. And finally, when I realized that, it's sort of like exposing a sore where you could finally put some application of it, and through recognizing that grieving was there, a lot of crying. I didn't want to do it in front of anybody, but also a lot of crying at home or in the car or when I was leaving and so forth. But that was an important release. And when Elaine passed, John and I were talking, when Elaine passed, I could not have asked her to stay alive another minute based on what her life was like. And so I sort of felt a relief. And so in answer to your question, I guess the simple point of it is to understand we have to go through a grieving process because of our love, but also we've got to get rid of that guilt because it's foolish and ridiculous, and we've got other people we can help out. Interesting. Who is if you can help me with this, he just wrote an article. He gave a graduation speech, a top-notch tennis player. I don't know, just Federer? I think it was Federer, but anyway, so he gave a speech, a graduation speech, and it was rated as one of the very best graduation speeches ever, because he asked the crowd, as the world champion or whatever it is, how many times do you think I scored a point? The answer is 54% of the time. In other words, he was unsuccessful 44% of the time. And so, please, you and I understand that we're not going to be successful every bit of the time. Even world champions are only able to do it 54% of the time. And if you're a baseball batter at 360 you know, the 300 batting average, that's really pretty good. If you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, maybe you will get a championship ring. There was a question over here.
Sure, so I have a question here. They say, asking for help can feel like I'm complaining or don't want to be a caregiver. What advice do you have?
To understand that to ask for help means you're not giving up. To ask for help is a sign of courage. To ask for help means that you are trying to re-establish the strength in your body and in your soul so you can get some respite and strength back. Because again, if you don't take care of yourself, your battery runs down. When the battery runs down, we have less patience. We are causing our own health issues. I want to get back to 40% of caregivers die before their loved one. Why do you want to kick off before your loved one? Why do you want to do that? Doesn't make any sense to me. So you just better start knowing so you better start knowing to ask for help and to get involved. That's the wise thing to do. Should I go so far as to say that not ask for help is a selfish thing? It could be interpreted that way, but we don't want to do that.
I've got another one here from online. Can you share a bit about your experience writing the book? When did you start and how long did it take you?
The question is, how could I possibly have lost the election for governor back in 1978? So anyway, the question was about writing the book. Sometimes, do you ever wake up and just feel there's something you got to do? What was happening is, you know, I was going through this experience with Elaine, and I may have mentioned that I had a good friend who was a caregiver, but he was not taking, he would yell at his wife for wanting a blanket to cover her shoulders, or she took another cookie, and it just pained me so much to understand what the person living with Alzheimer's is going through versus how was being treated. And so I had to do something. And then I was fortunate enough to run across a woman reporter for the Journal Sentinel, and she wrote a book about Bonnie Blair. I don't know if you have heard of her. She was a world champion speed skater, and Bonnie Blair's mom had Alzheimer's. But anyway, so I was able to meet someone who was aware of the challenge of being a caregiver, and also someone who had a great talent and a patient with me. There are some really interesting stories that I wanted to put in there that were unrelatable, but I thought sort of funny, but she helped me keep them out. But anyway, so it was just a matter of wanting to do it and having a feeling, yeah, I want to make life better for other people, and if I share this, maybe it can make a difference.
Thank you. Another question from our in-person attendees. What specific topics could we advocate to our representatives to best support our caregivers?
Number one, protect the research funding. Protect, you know. And even if your representative, your U.S. senator or state congressman supports it, give them a call anyway and tell them thank you for fighting for you, because that's going to mean a lot, so they can fight just a little bit harder. I don't know what's going on in the Minnesota legislature, but in Wisconsin they are working to expand the amount of daily assistance for in-home caregivers financially. And so we're hoping that that's going to pass. That has support on both sides of the aisle. Sometimes it's so difficult to be patient with people who are on the opposite side of the aisle. But I think you and I have to understand that as much as we might get angry with the opposition, it's going to take us and the opposition to make some progress. And so if you can talk friendly and nice to the people you think aren't going to do their job, but help them understand, that could make a big difference maybe.
Thank you. Our next one is from the online audience. How and when did you tell or involve your children in the diagnosis and prognosis?
Okay, that is a very important question. So I wrote the book, and I would be on the speaking tour, and I would get that same question. And here, I'm going through my grieving, and I'm taking care of Elaine, but I don't talk enough with my children. I don't share enough, not only what I'm going through, but I don't ask them what their feelings are. And so what happened when I came out with another edition, the third edition, I came out with Conversations from the Road, which incorporates therein the discussions I finally had with my children about how they were feeling. And so, you know, shoulda, coulda, and woulda. I wish I would have involved them more. If Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse. Remember, we covered that a little bit ago. And I wasn't smart enough to make sure that I would have my children involved in the process. They were wonderful. I am not complaining at all. I just really fumbled the ball completely by not having them share with me their feelings and their emotions.
The next question here says, I call it caregiver clam, where the caregiver won't let anyone else help because no one can do this as well as I can. How did you, or who did you ask to help you, and how did you let go?
Who did I ask to help me? Many times I didn't ask anybody to help me because I thought I could do it alone. And people would ask, you know, call if I can do something. I never called them. And so my suggestion is for caregivers clamp, if that's what the term is. My suggestion is that friends of caregivers, instead of saying, I will help you, call me, I will say, why don't I'll pick up the medications, or I'll cut the grass, or I will get the oil changed on the car, or will, you know, it's something very specific. I'll come over and visit with so-and-so for a period of time. So it has to be a very specific suggestion, and there again, we caregivers have to understand that that help is going to be so important, because we have a responsibility, yes, to our loved one, but we also have other people in our world, in our sphere, that can benefit by our well-being and by giving advice and counsel. Grandchildren, great-grandchildren, children, friends. All right.
This next question is from somebody online. They share, my wife gets very depressed when she realizes what's happening to her. Is it okay to tell her it's okay to feel down because that's her reality, but to reassure her that you're there for her? In other words, can you talk a little bit about your experience and how you approached it when your wife became frustrated or depressed with what was going on?
What I learned was the importance of joining her world. If she was in the thought process that she did not have dementia, I joined with her on that. And when she was feeling down and out, I joined with her on that too. And so I don't think it's necessary to convince someone that they have Alzheimer's. Let them carry that feeling with them and just support it in every possible way you can. I just learned that to join her world is the best thing I can be doing to help her live her best life possible.
All right, we'll do one or two more here. How did you cultivate patience after Elaine would repeat a question multiple times in an hour?
How did I cultivate patience? I tried to find ways around it, and this was not my idea. I went through counseling with the Alzheimer's Association, and part of what I learned to do was to get a whiteboard, and it would have today's date on it, and then it would say, we are leaving at 10:30 in the morning, which when are we leaving? It's on the whiteboard. And redirection, asking the same questions over, why do you ask that question? Or, why don't we do something like fold some towels or cut some celery or do something or another? So redirection is an important factor in trying to get away from those repeat kind of questions which are so frustrating, and understand that they are frustrating, they drive you nuts. So anyway, I was going to say one of the things that what's the next question? Is there one, or are we all set?
No, I think that brings us to the end of our questions. So go ahead and we'll wrap up when you're finished.
Okay, well, I'm going to just say thank you for the opportunity. One of the things that I always wanted to be a governor. And since I was like 4 years of age, I prayed I wanted to be a governor. I should have prayed for 4 four-year terms. I didn't do that. I just prayed to be governor. So I was. That's okay. But I also wanted to have a horse. I lived in the city of Milwaukee, and once a year my dad would take me to this stable, and then we would go for a trail ride for 1 hour. And I loved it. That was really, so I wanted to have a horse. And so I lost the election for governor back in 1978, and I moved to a hobby farm because I took a job in central Wisconsin. We lived on a hobby farm, and I got a horse. And the horse's name was Brianna. But for this purpose, the horse's name, I'll change to Thunderbolt Killer. And so I bought Thunderbolt Killer, and Thunderbolt Killer was half-trained, okay? And so what would happen is I had a horse trainer come on Saturday morning, and he would tell me what to do with Thunderbolt Killer during the course of the week. And you should understand that when you work with a horse, what you try and do is have them understand that you have a whole halter around you. This is not going to make your life any better, what I'm telling you. But anyway, so you have a halter underneath the thing, and what you do is, and you also have a twitch. So you hold the horse's head is here, and you hold the halter here, and you have a twitch. And what you do is you say walk, and you give the long twitch so the horse feels on the back. He said walk, and he feels that, so the horse walks. You say whoa, and you sort of pull on the chain, which causes a little bit of disturbance underneath, and the horse whoas, okay? So we're working on this. Oh, God, this is terrible. But anyway, so we're working on this, and finally the day comes for me to get on the horse. And so I sit on that horse, and I'm very proud to be there. You could tell that Thunderbolt was very proud that we got to this point. And so what happened was I say walk, and the horse walks. I say trot, and the horse trots. I say whoa, and the horse stops. We're stopped, and all of a sudden a rabbit jumped out from behind a bush, and causing the horse to buck and jump so much that my right foot come out of the stirrup, and the horse's right rear foot got caught in the stirrup. I tapped the horse on the shoulder. I said, look it, I said, if you're getting on, I'm getting off. Thank you.